Good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming and joining us here on the Tribe Public channel, if you will. We really appreciate you being part of the Tribe around the world. Note that we have over 20 countries now representing the Tribe and joining us, and please continue to forward your friends to us so we can all learn together. Remember, the spirit of this is to continue, like you today have joined, to get the experts and the leaders of companies that you are interested in, not just who I'm interested in. In this case, we are all in, I guess, an agreement. We're interested in hearing from our speaker today. His name's Dietrich Stephan, as you all know, Ph.D. He's the CEO and founder chairman of NeuBase Therapeutics, and NeuBase trades on the NASDAQ symbol NBSE. As all of you may or may not know, I've been investing in the company since it went public on the NASDAQ in 2019, and I'm excited to be an investor and looking forward to what Dietrich can do with his platform. And as many as you know, we about three and a half years ago, we all discovered Fate Therapeutics, another platform in the biotech space that's ballooned up amazingly and really built value for shareholders, and now is worth over $4.5 billion. Our little company today is making progress. We're north of 200 million, and we've got some events coming up here at NeuBase. And without further ado, note that Dietrich is going to be available for Q&A after his 15 to 20 minute presentation today. Please remember you can send your questions, if you already haven't, to through the Zoom chat feature today during the call as they come up, and then I'll look to serve those to Dietrich, and please feel free to do so. We'll try to wrap this all up in about 30 minutes. And thanks again for joining us. Again, remember after this, if you have more questions, you can send them to us. And at the same time, continue to add to your wish list of other experts to come back. And if again, after this, you want to hear more from Dietrich, we'll look to get him back on here in a short period of time if you express your interest at the wish list at the Tribe Public website. Thanks again. And without further ado, please, Dietrich, start your presentation. Anything you want to start with beyond that?
Yeah. Thank you so much for the introduction, John, and for the opportunity to be with you and your audience today. It's a real pleasure. NeuBase Therapeutics is a pharmaceutical company that is working to accelerate the genetic revolution with a first-in-class synthetic medicines platform. And I'll describe to you what that means in a moment. But conceptually, you can think of the medicines that we are developing as heat-seeking missiles that can be administered into a person's body who's suffering from a disease, and they will home in on the gene that is misbehaving and silence it before it can manifest in a disease. And the elegance of this is that we use nature's own information encoding scheme to do this. The genetic blueprint, as you know, is 3 billion bases long. Each of us has one copy from mom and one copy from dad, and it's comprised of ACs, Gs, and Ts. And so we can run on the rails of that and simply program in the sequence that we want to target into our drug and let it loose. So the elegance of this strategy is that it promises to fundamentally disrupt how the pharmaceutical industry has been developing drugs historically and enable a world where these drugs can be developed literally against any human disease, because every human disease has a genetic driver. And it can be done in a scalable way. So think of developing the first of our drugs in a more classical way. But thereafter, we're taking the same chemical entity essentially and simply flip-flopping the sequence of the ACs, Gs, and Ts in the heat-seeking component of the missile. And thus, the potential is for a truly scalable pipeline with limitless potential. And I think that's why we're so excited about being here today early in our growth phase with you because we believe we will be one of the dominant companies to emerge in the next few years. We are starting in 2 genetic diseases. The first is called Huntington's disease. The second is called myotonic dystrophy type 1. Both of these have the potential to be multi-billion-dollar top-line revenue opportunities in a few short years, and I'll describe some comparables around that. So they are by no means small, but later this year we'll be announcing expansion of that pipeline into areas such as oncology, and I think that'll be an exciting announcement. We've put a wonderful team around this. I've had the pleasure of working with many teams in my career, and this is the absolute best team that I've worked with. It comprises leaders who were involved in the Human Genome Project, who co-invented genome editing, who were the leaders of institutes such as the National Cancer Institute, the $5 billion a year funding agency at the federal government, and 4 members of the National Academies of Science, Medicine, and Engineering. So it's a very serious team that collectively has developed hundreds of new products. And again, we're a really, really unique point in history where historically the way we've developed drugs is throw random chemicals at cells and hope some of them stick and have the desired effect. And as we all know, each drug on average takes a decade or more to bring to market and costs between $2 and $4 billion. And so it's absolutely not a scalable approach. And moving forward, you'll see the impact of companies like ours accelerate. So why would you invest in us, and why would you do it right now? This is an important slide. First of all, we turn diseases off at their root cause using a proprietary platform that is well protected with intellectual property. We're the only company that has this chemistry, and we've shown that we can turn diseases off at their root cause. This is a massive market. I mean, as you all know, there are between 5,000 and 7,000 individual rare genetic diseases that collectively affect 10% of the global population. And only 5% of those have available solutions. So that's a market size of about 700 million people that are touched with that category of disease. Half of us will be touched with cancer. So that's another X billions of people on the planet, and half again of those will die of their disease. The rest of us will be touched by common chronic diseases that have genetic drivers in combination with environmental insults. And then think about the impact of infectious diseases and how they've disrupted our world today. And this platform is perfectly suited to address those types of disorders as well. I've talked to you about an unparalleled team that has come around this platform technology. We're very early in our growth cycle. We went public a little over a year ago. We've only been in existence for a little less than 2 years. And I would say we're about to enter our growth phase. So we recently capitalized the company. We have roughly 2 years of runway ahead of us. And it will be a transformational time in the history of the company, where we will show that our medicines work in animal models of these diseases and dose our first patient later next year. And comparable companies that are clinical stage to ours usually trade in excess of $1 billion market cap. So if you think about the time frame, say 18 months before we're in the clinic, that's the growth trajectory where we're aiming. All right, so what is this platform? On the right, you see a broken protein, and that's usually what causes human diseases, is that you're born with a mutation or you get a mutation across your lifetime and a protein in your body conks out. Every protein is encoded for within your genome that you got from mom and dad. And those genes are photocopied into RNA molecules and eventually turned into a protein. So rather than trying to develop drugs against proteins, we're simply going upstream. And the rationale there is that proteins are very complicated, floppy, confusing globs, whereas genes are linear ACGT, and we can target them directly. And so that's precisely what we're doing. And the key, or the secret sauce, is this scaffold into which we can program the sequence. And that scaffold confers precision of target engagement. It's biologically inert, so it doesn't trigger an immune response, which of course is important if you have a lifelong therapy that you take, let's say, every 3 months. You don't want an inflammation to be generated against that drug. And we've shown that it's easy to take. So systemically administered drugs get everywhere in the body. And so we can address literally any disease of interest. These are the buckets of Lego parts that comprise our platform. And I'm not going to go into detail on each one, but I do want to paint a visual image for you that we have these 4 buckets of parts that we can draw on and snap together to create each of these new potential therapies. And it really does feel like Lego blocks. They're modular. So for example, the scaffold that we've talked about is the the vertical wavy line on the right side of your slide there. That, again, can be snapped together. Every time it's snapped together, it forms the exact same chemical entity. Into that, the next bucket of parts can be programmed, and these are what are called the nucleobases, the A, C's, G's, and T's. And as part of our platform and our IP, we have a suite of engineered nucleobases which further add precision to the targeting of the misbehaving gene. And key to this, and where others struggle, is you only want to turn off the broken gene. You don't want your drug landing on the normal copy that you got from one of your parents, let's say, or to any of the other sequences of ACs, Gs, and Ts in the genome or transcriptome. If you do that, you might turn something off that you don't want to turn off and cause side effects. So the name of the game here is precision of engagement, and that's where these nucleobases really shine, coupled with the scaffold. We have the capability to add different types of moieties in the backbone around the ends that further refine how the drugs engage with various cells and tissues in the body. And you hear some of our competitors using, for example, antibodies or antibody drug conjugates to get their drugs to where they need to be. We do the same thing, but we also have the ability to go in various different directions. I'm not going to talk about the linkers that we can add to the ends, but this allows us to target all different kinds of mutations down to the single base mutation level, which is, again, an area that others struggle in. Intellectual property is the name of the game in these high science companies. We've got arguably the best biotech IP firm in the world contracted to develop this intellectual property on a go-forward basis. Wilson, Sonsini, Goodrich, Rosati out of the Bay Area, Vern Norval developed the Affymetrix patents, they developed the PCR patents, and we do view this as a technology on that level. And there are advantages of our technology, which I'm going to go to in a moment. But conceptually, this field was proven to be transformational, meaning digitally targeting misbehaving genes with the launch of a drug named Spinraza. This is not a drug that we developed. It's a first generation heat-seeking missile type of drug targeting a gene that causes spinal muscular atrophy. This is a horrific disease. These little kids who inherit the broken gene generally die very early in life. And this drug was shown when injected into the spinal cord at a regular frequency in these kids, to be transformational. So now, rather than dying, they're running around playing baseball and having a real life. And the transformational nature of the drug is reflected in the revenues that you see on the right. So after only 3 years on market, this drug was doing over $2 billion a year, and it was one of the best launches for a rare disease drug ever. Now, why do I mention this? Number one, because the strategy works. We're not imagining that if we target a gene with one of our drugs, we will have a therapeutic effect. It's now proven. And that takes a lot of the conceptual risk out of what we're doing. The second is that each of the diseases that we're starting with are 2 to 3 times more prevalent than spinal muscular atrophy. So Huntington's, as you see on the left, has an incidence of almost 6 per 100,000. That's 3 times the prevalence of spinal muscular atrophy. And if you do the simple math, that portends 3 times the revenue potential. So these are non-trivial disorders from a bootstrapping perspective. And again, we're hopeful that we will be in the clinic at the end of next year with one or both of these drugs. All right, just a brief flavor. This is Huntington's disease. It primarily affects the brain, and essentially the brain dies and then the person dies. It affects people in midlife, usually after they've already had kids, and each of their kids has a 50% chance of having this horrific disease. There is no available treatment, and not only is it a brain disease, but there are multiple other tissues in the body that are affected. And so while some of our competitors in the Huntington's disease area are directly injecting their drug into the CNS compartment, the brain compartment, on a regular basis, which, by the way, I don't think patients appreciate, they miss on all of the other systemic pathologies that affect these patients, such as diabetes, muscular atrophy, and so forth. So the ideal therapy for a patient would be a drug that's easy to take. You can take it at home once every 3 months, let's say. It only turns off the bad gene and bad protein, and it's reversible. So if there should be any side effects, the drug can simply be retracted. And because it doesn't cause any side effects, you can give it before the brain tissue starts to die. And I think it's obvious, but worth restating. Once your brain dies, we can't yet grow it back. So you want to get ahead of that process. And in general, people think that that the brain cell death or the neurodegeneration occurs about a decade in advance of symptom onset. So by the time you have symptoms, it's already essentially too late. And the only way to get a decade ahead of the disease is through genetic testing of at-risk individuals, coupled with long-term chronic administration of the drug. Okay, I want to show you a couple of pictures, and then I'm going to turn it back over to John. This is an image that illustrates that a single injection of one of our drugs that acts as a heat-seeking missile goes everywhere in the bodies of these non-human primates. So anywhere you see gray shading, we've gotten drug. On the right side, you see the brain light up. But brain is not our only target organ. Our second disease area is myotonic dystrophy, and that's primarily a skeletal muscle and heart condition. In pink here, you see that our drugs selectively turn off just the broken protein. So in candidate 3, for example, you see no pink bars, only blue bars. And that's what you want. You want all of the broken protein gone. And ultimately, that's where we're going with this technology is easy to take, precise, and well tolerated. This is the group I mentioned. These are folks that have built and run very big organizations. So for example, Diego Morales, part of the executive committee of J&J, where he spearheaded J&J Innovations. Dov Goldstein helped build Loxo Oncology and sell that to Lilly last year for $9 billion, and that forms Lilly's oncology franchise. And we've got thought leaders such as George Church, who's a prolific professor at Harvard Medical School, Steve Dowdy, who is arguably the best in the business of RNA therapeutics, Peter Nielsen, who invented our technology in 1991, and Robert Friedlander, who, while he was a professor at Harvard, was the first person ever to improve the symptoms of Huntington's disease in animal models. So the path forward is a time of extreme growth for the company. Later this year, we'll be announcing that we have nominated what's called a lead candidate for one of our programs, Huntington's disease or myotonic dystrophy or both. That will trigger the formal toxicology work and dosing of first patient next year. And we hope to get clinical readout on both safety and efficacy within a year thereafter. And that promises conditional approval. So we're on a short runway here to having therapies on the market, and we're concurrently expanding the pipeline. I'll leave this up so you can study it during the Q&A. But the key point here is that there's lots of room to grow, and companies similar to ours, a little further along and not quite as comprehensive in terms of their platform opportunity and the unlimited pipeline nature, are trading for significant multiples on where we are today. And so, for example, two companies IPO'd over the last 2 months, Dyne and Avidity. Again, neither of them have a big platform underneath them. They're really using off-the-shelf parts that they can snap together. Each one IPO'd for over $1 billion. And that was keyed off of showing that the drugs work in animal models. And I just mentioned that this quarter is when we will deliver that identical data. So that's the gap that we intend to close in the next months. A little bit of luck and continued execution. And then as we get closer to the clinic, that's where you get into the multi-billion-dollar market cap realm. And so we don't think there's any shortage of opportunity here in the short term. And ultimately, we intend to build a company like Genentech or Vertex, which are, in the $50 billion plus market cap ranges. And we see no reason we can't do that with this team and this technology. So I'll stop there, but I really want to reemphasize to you why this is a good opportunity today. We can turn diseases off at their root cause with a scalable and easy to take platform chemistry. And we've proven we can do that in cells from patients with real human diseases. It's a massive and really unlimited market opportunity. And it all is conditional on this platform and the features that we validated earlier this year. This team's done it before, over and over and over again. Literally hundreds of drugs and diagnostics have been developed by this team. There is no stopping us. And we've got plenty of cash to get into the clinic and really reach that next major inflection point. So John, back to you, and happy to take some questions.
Absolutely. Well, thanks again, Dietrich. Exciting times for NeuBase and NeuBase shareholders, I believe. And we've got a few questions here that we'll go right into, if that's okay. The first one comes from Randy Scher out of my hometown, original hometown where I was born in Evansville, Indiana, where BMS was at one time, and now home to the first biotech fund. Happy to highlight them at Daylight Capital, just down the road from my folks. But anyway, Randy would like us to, his question is, and I think you just addressed it in the first part of it, but since you're still on track to present some preclinical data this year, like to know what key items should we be looking at for in the animal models?
Yep. So there are really two components to getting a therapy on market. One is that the drug itself has to work. And we've shown, and that's called a pharmacophore. And so we've shown we can stamp these out in a high throughput fashion. We've got sort of a robotics infrastructure that we then screen them with, and we can iterate very rapidly. So this cycle takes days, not months and years. And once we lock in on the pharmacophore, then we can decorate it with the delivery chemistry. And that is what allows these drugs to be delivered in different ways, intravenous or sub-Q or direct injection into a muscle or the spinal cord and so forth. And so the two key attributes that will be important in this data set to look at are, number one, performance of the pharmacophore. Does it do what it's supposed to do? And does it not do what it's not supposed to do? And what I mean by that is off-target effects. Second is, can it get to the tissue where the disease manifests itself after an easy-to-take administration? And does it cure the disease in these animals? So those are the two features that I would suggest investors focus on.
Okay, thank you. Related to that, one of the questions is, in what form will you release this data that you're expecting to come? How will it come out? How will you look to present that?
Yeah, I would say we're probably going to do a top line readout by press release, followed by a public presentation, probably in some form of a research day, if you will, albeit probably virtually.
Okay. Also, related to your platform, can you compare it to how you might be more accurate than checkpoint inhibitors or other targeted therapies? How would you compare yourself?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So really it revolves around being able to put the entire genome in a computer and then zoom in on the gene that you want to target, that you know is causal in a disease, whether it's causing cancer or hiding a tumor from the immune system. Those are all genetically driven targets. And then we look at that gene and we find a sequence that we want our drug to engage in and turn off. And then what we do is we look across all of the other real estate in the genome and make sure that that sequence that we're targeting is not present anywhere else. And that provides a very precise docking site for the drug, and it simply can't engage elsewhere. And so when you think about therapies that might be small molecule, they could stick to a lot of different other things in your body. That's why almost every drug has side effects. And that includes monoclonal antibodies. The precision of nucleobase engagement is even higher than you would get with a monoclonal antibody, for example.
Okay, thank you. Follow-up question from Evansville, Indiana, Randy. Says, with the multiple target possibilities for the Patrol platform, does NBSE have any licensing strategy in mind?
Wonderful question. I could argue that the opportunity space is too big for just one company, even with the scalability that our platform portends. There are literally tens of thousands of genes in the genome that we could go in and try and switch on or off and correct. And so we believe it's in the best interest of the shareholders of the company to consider out-licensing some therapeutic areas. And we're in deep discussions with a number of potential partners on that exact topic. And as you know, these transactions, again, zoom all the way out, I think classic big pharma is terrified of being supplanted by companies like ours. And so there's a tremendous amount of deal volume that's happening between big pharma and the very few companies like ours out there. And they're usually fairly robust. So they come with additional non-dilutive capital up front to fuel the co-development efforts, as well as biobucks on the back end that are often in the billions as drugs get to market. So yes, we are thinking about that, but we're going to be very strategic so that we do not sabotage the long-term value of our shareholders or our company.
Fantastic. Well, let's just say if we have a kite-like moment, don't be. I might encourage you to look at that $9 billion or $12 billion bids that we saw a couple of years ago in Kite and Juno. So hopefully that we'd be so blessed, right? If along the way here. Switching gears to sort of the financial side of this, at one point, right after you went public, it was highlighted that David Einhorn from Greenlight Capital had bought close to 10% or 10% of the company with and funded you directly. With marquee investors like that, you had the public offering in the spring. Is it fair to say that you've picked up a number of other investors along the way, and also noted that you have 6 analysts covering you now from respected firms? I believe all have outperform or buy targets on you. Unfortunately, many of the people at the tribe, outside of the portfolio managers on this that are part of the tribe, they don't see this research. Could you speak to that coverage in any way you're comfortable, and at the same time to your shareholder base? What does that look like today?
Yeah. So we were thrilled that Greenlight Capital was an early investor in the company, and they were in at essentially founding of the company. And we subsequently did an offering in April. We had initially targeted raising 20 million, and we had almost more than 6 times demand for that offering. And so we upsized it twice, and we really had the opportunity to invite investors in that were fundamental, long-term, strategic investors. And so the shareholder base is very strong. I think it's safe to say that the offering in April was very well received. Each of these analysts picked up at risk, meaning we had not done a transaction with any of their banks before, but they saw the potential. And I think, our stock has been trading between 8 and 9 over the last few months, and their price targets generally are, I'd say on average, 15 to 17, somewhere in that range. And it's consistent across the group. And that's in line with what we believe the short-term opportunity is as well.
Fantastic. On the stock side of things as well, do you have any idea where the breadth of market makers are in the stock today? And also related to the balance sheet, can you confirm that if there's any debt or no debts, and do you have a shelf in place for future purposes?
Yes. So the cap table is extremely clean, and one of the things that we like is that a big chunk of the company is owned by the management, and so management is fully incented to knock this out of the park. There is no debt. There is a strong balance sheet of cash, again, that lets us burn for over 2 years. And in terms of a shelf, our shelf will be in place in Q2 of next year, which we believe is plenty of time should we want to do another transaction, but we're really not raising money right now.
Okay. We've reached the end of our time promised to the tribe, which is about 30 minutes. And yourself, I know you're busy. Would you like to wrap things up and just leave one quick last statement? And again, for those of you who didn't get your questions answered, or you come up with questions afterwards, please feel free to send it to me, and we'll get them back on, or we'll get it directly addressed. Thank you.
John, thank you. We view our shareholders as partners and are always available for any questions you or your group might have. So thanks again for having us.
Absolutely. One last reminder, we set up a Tribe public channel now at YouTube. Sometime in the next week or so, I'll get this video up. And if you want to review it and see his presentation again, or go back and if you think you missed something, it'll be there. And I'll let you know via the Tribe This Week, which will come this Friday again.
Thank you.
If and when that's our